The president also lashed out at Arizona Republican Senator Jeff Flake and endorsed his primary challenger. Dana, next week the president will hold his own rally out in Phoenix, though the mayor there has asked him to delay it out of concern it could inflame tensions.
Margaret, the president was quick to condemn the attack in Barcelona as a terrorist attack and criticized for not doing the same in Charlottesville this week. How is his latest response, the one to this incident, being interpreted as compared to that?
Well, President Trump, while he had previously said he likes to wait for all of the facts, was very quick, as you point out, in the case of Barcelona, to post a reply within hours rather than days, which is how long it took him to really fully address what happened and is happening in Charlottesville. So what we are hearing from within the administration right now is just this general concern about the president's messaging and the internal fighting and the divisions that are being laid bare here. What we are hearing from the outside, from groups such as CARE, which represents Muslim Americans in the United States, is a very swift condemnation not only of the attacker in Barcelona, an attack claimed by ISIS, but also the President of the United States because of those inflammatory remarks. He referenced a mass killing of Muslim soldiers in the Philippines, a urban legend that has been debunked as an example for what should be done. And so that has drawn swift condemnation from the outside. It just feeds into this overall narrative as Republican senators start questioning whether they can be associated and start publicly questioning, as Bob Corker did, whether the president is fit for office.
Margaret, you mentioned that story in regards to General Pershing. That's been debunked. Do we have any sense why the president is so drawn to that story?
This is a story he has told again and again when he was on the campaign trail. He was called out at the time by fact checkers from different organizations, from different publications, again and again when he retold this story. He clearly finds it effective because, as he says, in his mind, it reflects the toughness of the policy, the toughness on terrorism, as he refers to it. But this is a story that is not based in historical fact. And it is one that really hits at this idea of how to best offend Muslims and how to best deal with any kind of threat. Very oddly, the president seems to be endorsing the mass murder of these soldiers. And so this is clearly not something that is on the White House communications messaging team idea of how to best respond in the wake of a tragedy. This is something that the president himself has put out there. He finds it compelling.
You mentioned White House messaging. Strategist Steve Bannon did 3 interviews in 2 days, and this is someone who'd been keeping a low profile over the past few weeks. Suddenly this is changing now. What do you make of that?
This is really, it raises more questions, Dana, frankly, because we've known that Steve Bannon, the president's chief strategist, also very key in his campaign, has been sort of on razor's edge here. Is he staying? Is he going? His job has appeared in jeopardy. You heard that lukewarm response from the president when he was asked at his press conference this week, will you keep Steve Bannon on board and does he have your confidence? So this idea that Steve Bannon, who has really tried to avoid the press, been very critical of the press, suddenly called a reporter out of the blue and gave an interview that he then, after the fact, claims was off the record and always intended to be, and somehow was tricked by a reporter, has drawn a lot of questions about whether this is perhaps a more strategic decision of Steve Bannon to message in a way that could be useful to the president, that could be useful, frankly, to his own job prospects, because some of the things that he said in these articles is that he's helping to take the heat off the president, that he's explaining away here that drawing a wall between himself and the alt-right, so-called alt-right, and the white supremacists who back them, but also giving credence to it by saying they can be politically useful. But perhaps more worrisome for the national security staff at the White House is the fact that he spoke about the administration's strategy with North Korea and China, and he revealed some information that has raised concerns about possibly being classified, certainly not being helpful to the president. And due to that, he may be in some trouble here but we've seen Steve Bannon before in the corner and questions about whether he'd remain with the administration, and he has been a survivor. We will see this time, Dana, if it's different with Chief of Staff John Kelly at the helm now.
Yeah, and you mentioned North Korea there. Less troublesome is just the fact that he was contradicting the president on that and several other issues.
Right.
Bad-mouthed, his colleagues. And people now are calling for his removal, and that includes Representative Peter King from New York, a longtime supporter of the president. Let's listen to a clip right now.
I think it's important for the president to fire Steve Bannon. He should go. I mean, what he said the other day, where he was saying that he hopes the Democrats use race as an issue because that's a winner for Republicans, that to me is exploiting the racial issue that can't be allowed. Also, the fact that he is undercutting the president, the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State, and the head of the National Security Council on North Korea. To me, his time in the White House should be over.
Margaret, you mentioned we've seen him in the corner before, and he's able to fight his way out. How is this being talked about within the White House right now?
Well, this is a matter that Chief of Staff John Kelly has to make a tough decision about and give his recommendation to the president on. You heard the president waver on this, whether he would stay or go. There are political complications that he has to consider because Steve Bannon, if you remember, does have some very strong political influence on the outside. He has deep relationships with some of President Trump's financial backers and supporters, and so there's some question of what happens when he leaves. Would he be helpful or damaging from the outside? How would his exit happen if it were to, in fact, go that route? So this is something that is now in the public space when you have the president's own allies saying your staffer is not serving you, sir, he's hurting you, that you could see will get the attention of the president now. We'll see if he pulls the trigger. He's been reluctant to fire people. He, as you saw with the very extraordinary circumstances that led to the ouster of Reince Priebus, his former chief of staff.
That's right. Margaret Brennan with the very latest on another busy day with the White House. Margaret, thank you.